Hey guys, welcome, how's it going? Today I want to discuss the minimum wage. To be precise, the economic implications of raising it. So, it's actually a very complicated subject and I'll try to kind of just give you a general overview of it. But at the end of this video, we will be able to tell whether raising minimum wage is an appropriate and generally positive step or whether it's something that's gonna damage things, hurt the economy, hurt small businesses, or to summarize it, a negative step. In the previous video, I'm gonna put the card somewhere on the screen for you. I was kind of in the middle. I'm like, on one hand, this is good. On the other hand, this is bad. I didn't actually come to a definite conclusion. And I know it gets people frustrated at times. So in this video, I'll try to give you a simple answer. Yes or no. Will raising minimum wage be good or bad? So without further ado, let's begin. The first thing we should discuss probably is what the minimum wage debate is about. And the minimum wage is the lowest pay an employer can legally give a worker. In the US, it started in 1938 to help poor workers and boost the economy by getting people to spend more money. Over time, the value of minimum wage has changed. Now, people are debating if raising it makes sense or is going to hurt the economy. Those who want higher minimum wage say it's needed so people can afford the basics as living costs go up. And that's a reasonable point. They really do go up quite a bit. Especially since COVID, the inflation has hit not just the US, Canada, or the UK, but really every country in the world, it seems like. On the other hand, other people worry that higher wages could cause prices to go up, make businesses less competitive, and essentially lead to fewer jobs. Some even think it might mean workers get fewer hours or benefits instead of more pay. But okay, to understand everything, let's delve into the economic arguments and real-world experiences related to this minimum wage increases. And the main topic is, how does it affect jobs? One of the most debated aspects of raising the minimum wage is its potential on employment levels. Economic theory offers different predictions, and the real-world studies have also shown varying results. I know it's not something you'd like to hear, I wish it was more clear, but let me explain. So, we have this basic economic model. In this model, if the minimum wage is set higher than the natural market wage, some businesses might not be able to afford to hire as many people. So this, in turn, could lead to a situation where more people are looking for work than there are jobs available. The extent of job losses can depend on how sensitive businesses are to changes in wage costs. However, some economists argue that in certain job markets, employers have a lot of power to keep wages low. In such cases, a carefully planned increase in the minimum wage could actually lead to more jobs by pushing wages to a more fair level. Therefore, the effects of minimum wage on jobs might not be the same in all situations and could really depend on specific characteristics of the labor market. And despite the possibility of positive effects in certain markets, some studies actually suggest that raising minimum wage can lead to fewer jobs, especially for younger and less skilled workers. For example, research has estimated that a 10% increase in minimum wage could result in a 1 to 2% decline in employment of teenagers. Some studies also suggest that it could delay young people from entering the workforce, potentially harming their long-term earning potential. Furthermore, as wage increase, businesses might find it more cost-effective to invest in automation to perform tasks previously done by low-wage workers. This shift from human labor to machines could lead to job losses for low-skilled workers over time. Additionally, businesses might try to offset higher wage costs by reducing other benefits or limiting training opportunities. But, as I mentioned previously, it's a very complicated topic, and while some research shows that it might lead to job losses, there is other research that suggests little or no job losses. So, contrary to the concerns about job losses, there is a lot of research that's indicating that minimum wage increases have little to no noticeable negative impact on employment levels. Reviews that combine the results of multiple studies often show that the average employment response is very close to zero, suggesting that job losses are not a widespread outcome. So, studies that focus on broader range of low-wage workers, rather than just a small specific group like teenagers, tend to find essentially minimal effects on employment. One potential reason that the lack of significant job losses is that higher minimum wages can lead to lower employee turnover. Really, it's simple as that. When workers are paid more, they're more likely to stay in their job which reduces the costs associated with hiring and training new employees. Some research even suggests that minimum wage increases might primarily affect the number of job openings, making it easier for businesses to attract and keep workers at a higher wage, rather than leading to job cuts. If you watched up to this point, you probably have a question. Okay, so they did these findings, there are two separate studies. Didn't you promise a conclusive result? And yes, I did, and it's coming. Let me tell you why the findings differ. The different conclusions reached by studies on the employment effects of minimum wage increases can be partly explained by the challenges in studying this complex, once again, very complex issue. So, the way researchers select comparison groups, account for economic differences between regions, and design their own studies can significantly influence the results. Economists continue to debate the best methods for studying the impact of minimum wage, and variations in the time periods and locations analyzed can also contribute to the diverse range of findings. Therefore, it is crucial to carefully consider the research methods and specific context of each study when interpreting the evidence. And just a side note, I leave the sources and links to the research in the description below. So it's not just me hand-waving, oh, one study did that, one study did this, without actually pointing out what that study was. And if you don't believe me or you believe the conclusion was misinterpreted by me, you can check them out yourself and kind of come to your own conclusion. So now let's take a quick look at the impact on income inequality of this minimum wage increase. So if you look at a lot of this research, a more consistent finding in them is that minimum wage increases can effectively reduce wage and income inequality, particularly at the lower end of income distribution. Studies have shown that decline in the real value of the minimum wage over time has contributed to a widening of the income gap, suggesting that increasing it could help to reverse the trend. By raising the hourly pay of the lowest paid workers, minimum wages can narrow the difference between those at the bottom and those at the top of the earning scale. Furthermore, sometimes minimum wage increases can lead to a sort of a ripple effect where workers earning slightly above the new minimum wage also receive wage increases as employers adjust their internal pay scales. So, while some studies offer a more nuanced perspective, suggesting that the impact on overall household inequality might be less pronounced per se, the evidence still strongly supports the idea that minimum wage increases can be a valuable tool for reducing wage inequality, especially for the lowest earners. So, what about consumer spending? For example, if you make more money, you, in theory, should be willing to spend more money or invest more money. So, shouldn't that be beneficial for the economy? Well, not so fast. Let's look into this step by step. Studies have estimated that a significant increase in the federal minimum wage could lead to a substantial rise in total household spending. This increase in demand for goods and services could potentially create a positive cycle, encouraging business activity and leading to further job growth. Amazing, right? However, there is a possible negative effect, which is simply the risk of price increases and inflation, as businesses try to cover their higher labor costs by charging consumers more for goods and services. And so, minimum wage increase opponents argue that this could simply cancel out the intended benefit of higher wages if the overall cost of living increases by a similar amount. Nevertheless, there is research that came out somewhat recently that suggests that the extent to which minimum wage increases lead to price increases might actually be a lot smaller and more temporary than previously thought, especially for smaller, gradual increases. Therefore, while the short-term impact of minimum wage increases on consumer spending is likely positive, the long-term effects can be influenced by how much prices adjust, which nobody can really account for. So the broader impact of minimum wage increases on long-term economic growth is a little bit less clear. Supporters argue that increased consumer demand, along with potential improvements in worker productivity, which we'll discuss very soon here, could stimulate economic activity and lead to overall growth. On the other hand, there are concerns that higher labor costs could hinder business expansion, reduce investment, and potentially slow down economic growth. So it's, again, not super clear. Some studies suggest that while a minimum wage hike might provide a short-term boost to the economy, these effects are unlikely to last in the long term. The ultimate impact on long-term economic growth likely depends on a very complex combination of factors, including the size of the minimum wage increases, how consumers and businesses respond, and the overall economic environments. Wink wink, whatever is happening in the world right now. It just seems so ridiculous. But okay, this video is not about me whining about the state of the world, so let's just get to the next topic, which is essentially, will raising minimum wage improve workers' performance and staying in jobs for longer periods of time? And are there benefits? Are there costs for businesses? What are we looking at? So the efficiency wage theory suggests that paying workers higher wages can lead to better morale, more effort, and ultimately higher productivity. When employees feel like they're being paid fairly, they may be more motivated and engaged in their work, leading to improved output per hour. Studies have found a positive link between minimum wage increases and workers' productivity, suggesting that this can help businesses absorb some of the higher labor costs. Some economists have also connected higher wages to better physical and mental health and reduced stress, potentially contributing to improved job performance. However, it's worth noting that the relationship between wages and productivity might be influenced by other factors, such as the level of supervision and the overall work environment. Something we do know is that a significant potential benefit for businesses resulting from higher minimum wage is a reduction in how often employees leave their jobs. Low-wage industries often experience high rates of turnover, which can be expensive due to the cost of recruiting, hiring, and training new staff. Research has estimated the substantial costs involved in replacing low-wage workers. By increasing these wages, businesses can improve employee retention, leading to a direct cost saving and a more stable and experienced workforce. Studies have shown that even a relatively small increases in the minimum wage can result in a significant reduction in employee turnover rates. This increased retention can further contribute to productivity gains, as experienced workers are more efficient and require a lot less supervision. The one thing the studies don't mention, or at least don't dig into deep enough, is, let's say there are 20 places and they're all paying the same. Would workers want to go to a place that involves doing the least amount of work? That's a reasonable concern. And again, if there is a slightly more complicated job that used to pay $2 above the minimum wage, and now all of a sudden it's on par with minimum wage, then the employer doesn't increase the wage, what do we do, right? I think in this case, these businesses will lose their employees to those new minimum wage spots that require a lot less work, a lot less expertise, for example. Anyways, we can speculate for as long as we want, but there are some real-world examples of what happened when the minimum wage went up. So let's take a look. The first example will be San Francisco, where the minimum wage increased in 2014 to $12.25, which in turn resulted in positive job growth in leisure and hospitality. San Jose and San Diego County did similar minimum wage increases, which resulted in 10,300 new jobs in 2 years for San Jose and measurable steady increases in non-farm jobs in San Diego County. For instance, after San Francisco increased its tip minimum wage, the leisure and hospitality industry experienced positive job growth. Similarly, San Jose saw significant job creation following its minimum wage increase, with initial opponents acknowledging that businesses were not negatively impacted. San Diego County also experienced steady job growth even after 2 statewide minimum wage increases. Research focusing on concentrated labor markets, where a few companies dominate hiring, has found that minimum wage increases can lead to overall positive employment effects. However, a case study in South Korea, which saw a substantial and rapid increase in its minimum wage, showed a negative impact on manufacturing employment, although labor productivity and wages actually increased. These examples illustrate that the outcomes of minimum wage increases can vary considerably, depending on the specific economic conditions and the magnitude of the policy change. Of course, when you bring up minimum wage increase, the first thing people say is, oh, what about small businesses? Oh, what's going to happen to small businesses? Oh, are they going to go out of business? So let's look at that. Small businesses are often thought to be very vulnerable to increases in the minimum wage due to their potentially smaller profit margins and limited ability to absorb higher labor costs. Research suggests that in response to minimum wage hikes, small businesses might make modest adjustments to their workforces, such as offering slightly fewer part-time jobs, particularly those held by teenagers, rather than resorting to layoffs of full-time workers per se. A very interesting thing is, something to note, Some studies indicate that minimum wage increases can actually lead to closure of less productive small businesses, while more efficient and productive firms are better positioned to survive and potentially see increased profits. So this can result in a more productive overall distribution of businesses in the affected market. Many small businesses may also choose to pass some of the increased labor costs to consumers through slightly higher prices for their goods and services. Despite concerns about job losses, which is really usually the biggest concern, some research has found that minimum wage increases do not necessarily lead to job cuts in small businesses and can even result in benefits like reduced employee turnover, which can offset some of the higher wage expenses. But again, you can't just have one without the other. So, of course, there is a however coming up. So, here it is. However, it is important to acknowledge that other research suggests that minimum wage increases can negatively impact the financial health of some small businesses, potentially leading them to lower credit scores and higher probability of business closure in the future. The effects can also vary significantly across different industries, with sectors like restaurants, which often have a high proportion of minimum wage workers, being particularly affected. Overall, the impact of minimum wage increases on small businesses appears to be, what's the best way to put it, multifaceted, with some businesses really struggling and the other actually thriving when this happens. Another key argument often made by those in favor of raising the minimum wage is that it could lead to a decrease in the need for government-funded social assistance programs. The reasoning is simple. Low-wage workers earn more, they will be less dependent on public support such as food stamps, housing assistance, and welfare programs. Some studies have indeed estimated potential savings in government spendings on these programs as a result of minimum wage increases. Research indicates that a significant portion of individuals and families receiving public assistance includes those who are working or have working family members, often low-paying jobs, suggesting a potential link between low wages and reliance on these programs. However, other research suggests that the impact of minimum wage increases on overall participation in and spending on means-tested government assistance programs might be minimal. One reason for this could be that minimum wage increases might not effectively target those who are most in need of social assistance. Many individuals affected by minimum wage increase might not be enrolled in these programs, and conversely, many recipients of social assistance might not be working or might have their benefits structured in a way that are not significantly affected by a modest wage increase. Some argue that alternative policies, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit, which directly targets low-income families, might be a more effective tool for reducing poverty and dependence on government assistance. On a potentially positive note, some research also indicates that raising the minimum wage can reduce total household debt for those with low credit scores and increase their access to credit. While raising minimum wage may have some impact on reducing reliance on social safety nets, the evidence suggests that the effect is not substantial, and other targeted anti-poverty measures might play a more significant role. Lastly, I promise it's the quickest one, I want to discuss the economic implications of raising minimum wage and how they're viewed differently by economists and various organizations, reflecting a range of theoretical perspective and interpretations of the available evidence. And again, it's this fight between people who suggest that it's going to benefit the economy versus people suggesting that it's going to hurt the economy. Proponents often highlight the potential for poverty reduction, increased consumer spending, and the reduction in income inequality. They argue that the current minimum wage is often insufficient to cover even the basic living expenses, and that an increase is necessary to ensure a fairer distribution of economic gains. Some economists point to research suggesting minimum job losses and potential benefits like increased worker productivity and reduced turnover as reasons to support higher minimum wage. Conversely, opponents frequently emphasize the potential for job losses, particularly for low-skilled workers, and the negative impacts that higher labor costs could have on small businesses. Concerns are also always raised about the possibility of inflationary pressure, which could erode the purchasing power of the wage increase, which doesn't really help anyone. Something we haven't discussed in this video, but a lot of economists argue, is that the minimum wage interferes with the free market determination of wages and can lead to unintended consequences, such as businesses closing to automate or outsource jobs. There's also debate about the optimal level for the minimum wage, whether it should be a uniform federal rate or adjusted based on the regional economic conditions and cost of living. And of course, it makes perfect sense because living in California or Oregon is a lot more expensive than living in Midwest, for example. Furthermore, some economists suggest that alternative policies like targeted tax credits or wage subsidies might be more effective at supporting low-wage workers without the potential negative side effects of a minimum wage increase. And of course, the lack of clear consensus among economists underscores the complexity of this issue and the need for careful consideration of the potential trade-offs. But hey, I promised you a definite yes or no, so let's get to the conclusion. So, based on all the studies done, all the research summarized, all the evidence that we have, raising the minimum wage appears to be a move that can bring more benefits than drawbacks. Here you have it. It's likely to lead to a reduction in income inequality, ensuring that the lowest paid workers receive a fairer share of the economic pie. While concerns about job losses persist, a significant body of research suggests that these negative effects might be minimal or even non-existent, especially when considering the broader economic impact and potential benefit, like reduced employee turnover and increased worker productivity. Although its effectiveness as a sole solution to poverty is very much debated, a higher minimum wage can undoubtedly improve the financial stability of many low-wage workers and their families. Therefore, while careful consideration of the magnitude and timing of any increase is incredibly important, raising the minimum wage seems to be the step towards a more equitable and potentially more productive economy. And I think this is the message I want to finish this video with. So if you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, give me a like, and if there are any inconsistencies or something you've noticed, please leave your notes and questions down below. I will link all the research once again in the description. So don't worry, I'm not just pulling things out of thin air. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and have a great day. I'll see you in the next video.